This is Proverbs Guy with the Proverbs Guy official YouTube channel, and also representing Let's Talk Shalom. It's your favorite co-host, Your Dream Guy. Your Dream Guy, how are you today?
Good. I had some good news come in, and we also have a great guest today, so that makes it even better.
Do you want to introduce this great guest to folks?
Hi, so this is my friend Keely Daniels. Keely's a trauma and transition specialist, and her resume is a mile long. I think she might be the CIA. I'm not sure. We can't
No.
really ask her about that. And Keely's also our trauma specialist in the Dream Helper Network, or network of coaches. So Keely helps a lot of people in the faith community that have been through trauma.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Keely, can you explain to us first and foremost exactly what a trauma specialist does? How does that benefit, and who does that benefit?
Well, sure. I mean, trauma is a big buzzword these days, whether you're in the faith community or outside the faith community, of course. And so, people have been through things that are just very tough, and they're going through normal, what would be a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And so a lot of times they need someone to walk through that with them, and try to discover what God wants to tell them about what has happened, and where he was with them at the time of their traumatic experience. And uh, you know not to knock the counseling world or anything like that, but sometimes people just need someone that understands their faith journey also. And so I try to minister to people from a biblical perspective, and we do a lot of goal setting, and try to find meaning in what they've been through, and again what the Father's just trying to show them. And it brings a lot of healing. So yeah.
I would like to know what got you into this. Like, were you on a Florida beach one day underneath a coconut tree and a coconut just hit you in the head and you're like, you know what, that was traumatic and I bet I can help other people who have been through traumatic things? How did God bring you to this field?
So without bringing any shame upon my family, I did grow up in a pretty rough situation. um, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I too have 6 kids. I must be crazy, but um, and we just, we went through a lot, and I witnessed a lot as a child, and things that I prayed all the time and asked God to just really, uh, help my situation and to kind of heal my family. And I was a little girl going to a Catholic school, actually, and I just really had a pure-hearted faith at the time that God could do something, that he could miraculously turn things around. And I'd say about 7th grade, in that transitional time where you're trying to find your identity, where you're starting to have that, identity formation, uh, I definitely started to doubt, because things did not turn around for us at the time. And, so I turned to New Age, and became a self-proclaimed Wiccan for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and my husband and I both. And, I went every which way there was, just looking for what I knew. I knew there was something out there, something
You know, the
spiritual
Wiccan,
was real.
I've been told the Wicca community is very cultish, and you said that you've left that community, obviously.
Oh,
Do you
yes.
still have to, like, look over your shoulder ever? Do you ever feel
Well,
that way?
no. Shortly after I was born again, I had some fears about that, even though I had done just like in the book of Acts, where they took all of their, merchandise of witchcraft and burned it all. I did that very thing. I burned mine as well. But I but I just, one night I was looking out my windows. I was a mom of 4 kids at the time. My littlest was just about 8 months old. My husband was deployed in the Navy, and I was having some fear, and I was looking out the dark windows one night, and the Father just said to me, "Why are you scared? What are you looking for?" He said, "The demons see Jesus or Yeshua in you and they flee." That's what he said to me, and I haven't been scared ever
Wow.
since.
So
So,
there's so much, I guess, in the charismatic way, especially, there's this elevation of witchcraft
sure.
and superstition, and well, this happened because some witch looked at you wrong at Walmart,
Yeah.
and that's why you have a flat tire. I mean, it's just this constant. Some witch somewhere did something, and you're just walking around vulnerable to it. People you don't even know. Like, it just magnifies the darkness so much. And in the
Yes.
book of Galatians, Paul warned about this because, I mean, the Celts from Gaul and they're in Turkey, and this whole culture in the first century was very, don't get the evil eye on you, or the terrible things happen. Even the Jews had, bowls with incantations and lullabies and things, and necklaces to prevent this sort of random retaliation.
Hmm.
And people just live in absolute fear of that. So I'm really glad you guys are going into that, because there is a culture of paranoia
Yeah.
around
I've
the whole witchcraft
experienced
thing,
that.
especially if you leave, we'll put a spell on you. Think.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. I've experienced that in the faith community, and in the Christian community, in the Messianic community as well. Same thing. Just being worried that demons can just attack us at any time, and they really can't. We really are protected. I mean, and if we're not, then what's our faith for, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that nothing bad will happen to us. We will all go through trials and tribulations. Jesus, Yeshua promised that in this life we will have trials and tribulations, but he said, "Be of good cheer, because he's overcome the world," right? And he's in us. His spirit lives in us, and so we are able to be victorious over those things. We don't have to fear them. um, the only time to fear them is when we're living in blatant disobedience.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. Uh, your dream guy. Do you have any follow-up questions?
Oh, on the trauma thing, so we'll dive right into that. We'll get into certifications and whatnot a little bit. There is the book Pigs in the Parlor, and it's a big deliverance ministry book. It's very popular in the
Yeah,
'90s.
I'm
And
familiar
a
with it.
recurring a recurring theme of a lot of this is with trauma is an open door for the enemy.
Yes.
And maybe just expound upon that theologically. You're a minister.
Mhm.
On the spiritual side, the theological side, also maybe the just practical lived experience side. How true is that? Is like trauma make you more prone to being possessed, or oppressed or targeted, or do you think that's true, or why or why not?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes. So I have kind of modified my position on that recently. I believe that I agree with a minister called David Diga Hernandez, if you've listened to him.
Mhm.
I agree with what he's been saying recently, which is that, if you're a non believer, of course, you're open, and if you have trauma, yes, definitely. Trauma does, I believe, make you prone to both possession and oppression, as you mentioned. Um, and that's because he's been talking about strongholds recently, and I completely agree with this. That, for instance, believers, true believers, are not able to be possessed because you can't be owned by both the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Hakodesh, at the same time as being owned by Hasatan, Satan, right? Um, you can't have two masters, right? Truly, but my position on it is that a believer can definitely be oppressed, and it can greatly affect their lives. I mean, I've experienced it myself. I have I've still dealt with anxiety and panic attacks throughout my life, and actually, he mentions that he did as well for a while, but The key is, and I agree with him completely, is that believers deal with strongholds that they may or may not know that they have. And those are, I believe, formed by trauma, because what happens is that, what's a stronghold? It's something that you run to in battle for protection, right? And so when you're in a battle against the enemy, then there's these habits that we've formed, and these beliefs that we've formed based upon our traumatic histories, that we run to, and we feel like they offer us protection, when we really should be running to the Father, and we should be running to the tools that he offers, like the sword of the Spirit and his word, and everything. But we just, out of habit, we just run to things like fear, because we think fear will actually protect us. And in fact, it just, it lies, it's the lies of the enemy that we believe, and we keep on going back to the same position, and we get the same results.
So you're not necessarily, someone's not doomed to this per se. I mean, you're more likely to use fear as a shield, but you're not,
Yeah.
say, like, doomed to it. It's not an automatic cause and effect. You jump in
Right.
the water, get wet. It's not that
Yeah.
automatic or that guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So stronghold, I saw John Paul Jackson teaching on this. There's possession, like a demon is literally taking over your free will.
Correct.
Oppression is hanging around, just taunting you. And then there's a stronghold, isn't even a spiritual force. It's a thought pattern. It's like, the more you think a thought, the more your neurons get stuck in, they make a rut. It gets easier and easier to think that thought. So a stronghold is just a thought pattern that you repeated over and over, where it's like a big tower now. Every time you think it, it's a brick, and it builds this big wall. Is that maybe accurate of what a stronghold is?
It could be a behavioral pattern also, not even just a thought. I mean, and thoughts lead to behaviors, obviously, but yeah, I mean, if you run to, like a panic attack can actually be a behavioral pattern that you run to, because the stronghold is fear. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So there's this fight, flight, and fawn. Those are three kind of mechanisms of response.
That's true. Yes, absolutely.
Could you go into that a little bit? I know people know about fight and flight, but fawn is kind of a newer one.
It is newer, and I won't claim
I've never
to be
heard
an
of that
expert
one.
on that one, but what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I had never heard of that either.
Yeah, that's been a recent phenomenon, and it's more of like from what I understand, it's a freeze response, where you may just allow someone to treat you anyway, just to maybe avoid the conflict of whatever's going on, from what I understand. And most of the clients I work with really have more of a fight or flight, though. Still, I only have one that deals with the fawning.
So fawn's kind of like a deer, like they'll just kind of lay still, play dead, or like a possum would.
Yeah, basically.
So lay dead, let the bear nudge at you, and because if you respond, if you fight, it's going to eat you. If you run away, it's going to catch you and eat you. So just let it kind of do what it wants, and maybe it won't kill you. Just kind of lay there and let it maneuver you.
Yeah, and I think that can kind of go hand in hand with like dissociation. And I know, I'm not I must say I'm not licensed as a counselor, though I do have a master's in counseling, as you do, Brian. But
mine's just human services. You got the big papers.
Yeah, human services. Yep, correct, and board certified, life coach. But however, the dissociative part is, if you don't know, if our audience doesn't know, dissociation is, where you kind of intentionally or unintentionally have almost an out-of-body experience, or you kind of go somewhere else in your mind to block out whatever trauma is actually happening to you at the time. And then that can become a habit with seemingly benign things like that just stress you out, but may not be truly like a traumatic event to someone else, but it may trigger you because of a prior event. And then it, will cause you to have that same sort of a reaction that like your body just reacts based upon what you've been through in the past.
So it's kind of auto response.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe go into your certification some too, because I mean, before I got to like mental health, everybody's a counselor. Everyone that works in that field is a psychiatrist, and there was really no distinctions.
Yeah.
So maybe like your coaching and your degrees and all that, but also how it's different from maybe a psychiatrist, psychologist, or a counselor, or just the different roles people have, what they focus on.
Sure. So I am very, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So I have a whole bunch of things, but I think I'm in good company because the founding fathers of our country were, they had a vast array of education, right? So I think we're okay, right? But so I have a master's degree in human services counseling in the field of crisis and trauma from Liberty University. And then I have a partial doctorate towards the traumatology program as well through Liberty, and a partial PhD in public policy. And I've worked for a U.S. senator, and also I dabble in politics and counseling. So
a lot of people need their counseling because of politics.
Right. There's
a lot of politicians need counseling.
Right. Yep. Mainly, I got into the politics side just because I do have 6 kids, and I want to help protect our freedoms for our children. So, like I've worked for International Christian Concern for persecuted Christians all over the world, and also for the National Committee for Religious Freedom with former Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback. He was President Trump's ambassador for international religious freedom. So,
I believe Senator Brownback ran for president in like 2007.
2000. Yeah. Yes. I don't know how far he got past the pandemic, but correct. You're right. Yes.
I was a Mike Huckabee guy, but I remember he was in the same race.
Yeah.
My friend Mark Woodward is in a band called Mike's Chair. It's a big Christian band for a time. And he was telling me all about Sam Brownback back in 2007, 2008. He was all about it. He was so I remember that name still this whole time for some reason. Yeah. He just registered. So that's awesome, and you do pretty well everything. And your husband's in the Navy, he's a veteran.
Yeah.
And so, and you guys were doing some messianic kind of ministry, like, which kind of meets in the middle of Christianity and Judaism.
Yes.
Heal the gap.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've been blessed to be able to lead home groups, Torah study groups, and things like that from our home, where we'll actually have people from all different denominations come to our home and then learn the Hebrew roots, and then we've been part of Messianic synagogues. We've lived all over the East Coast, and we try to just do whatever the Father leads us to do and minister to whoever He tells us to minister to. So.
And you're a life coach too.
Yes, and I'm a board certified life coach, advanced life coach through the Association of Christians. American Association of Christian Counselors. Sorry, I'm also a member of another organization called the Association of Christians in Health and Human Services. Sorry.
So Keely is a trauma specialist at the Dream Helper Network. I do help people to get things and callings. And then I also went to the American Association of Christian Counselors, and also went to Liberty, like Keely did. And John Bratton, our grief specialist, also went to Liberty, and he also went to the American Association of Christian Counselors. So we all had these things in common after we kind of met each other.
Yeah.
But that's great. And we're looking at starting a nonprofit eventually, myself and Keely and our friend Angela. So Keely does everything, all the policy stuff. We want to know about procedural stuff. She just knows somebody that knows it, or she knows it, or has done it, or just she gets it done, which
Yeah.
is
Well,
which is
thank you very
awesome.
much.
So, what are your goals from here? From are you finishing your PhD or finishing your other degree, or
So we live a lot of um, trauma repair in our own home. We have two adopted kids. They're my niece and nephew, actually, and so we're kind of living every day with the things they've been through, and so at the moment. All education for me is on pause
Mhm.
because we need to focus on them and what they need at the moment. So, God willing, I will, complete one of those. And I'll tell you why. You know, once, when I went back to school for my bachelor's degree, I said to the Lord, well, why are you, leading me to go to school? You used uneducated people all the time, and he said, in the Bible, for instance, and he said, well, for you, it's about finishing something you start, because I used to be a big procrastinator, and now I just have a lot on my plate, um, but he just wanted me to finish something I started, and God is so good. He's so good, and I was a 16-year-old mom. My husband and I have been together actually since I was 13 years old, and now we've been together almost 29 years. If you want to date me, my age, that is, to find out how old I am. There it is.
well, you
Um,
guys met when you were 13?
yeah, when I was 13 and he was almost 15.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and then we had our first daughter when I was 16 and I got my GED, but I had not been to school since 7th grade.
Wow.
So, so I went to the health department and took some classes and things
Mhm.
like that on my own. And I went to college when I was 17, the immediate uh, winter semester right afterwards. And I really wanted to be a doctor, really, really wanted to be a medical doctor all my life. And I failed biology. So I thought, well, my dream's over. And so several years later, when I was born again at age 23, that's when God convicted me to go back to school. And I thought, well, I don't need to, now I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I can do a job of some sort or whatever. But He really convicted me to go and get my education, and then uh, I just asked the Father permission to be able to go all the way to my doctorate, because I wasn't really that great in school. I didn't get good grades. And like I said, I only went until the end of 7th grade and then got a GED. And I just wanted to prove it to myself and really glorify the Lord. I told him, I said, you'll have to go before me and you'll have to help me get good grades. I want to get good grades because I want your name to be lifted high and you to be glorified. And I graduated with honors with both my bachelor's and my master's degree. So,
Wow.
I have a 4.0 as well. Even though my education's on hold, I have a 4.0 right now. So,
So you're in good standing to go back. I think I'm still
yeah,
in academic probation from Liberty. So and it's so inspires people because we have this mindset. We're given this mindset like you straight A's through high school. If you don't do that, your life's ruined. You go to finish college right away, your life's ruined, and just it's either all or nothing.
mm-hmm.
And I failed first grade, failed 11th grade, dropped to high school 11th grade, had to go homeschool myself to graduate to join the Air
Yes,
Force, and it was this whole thing. I was in special ed for math for 5 years, speech therapy 3 years, and listed as mentally retarded in my elementary school. So it's you get all this stuff that gets you just kind of give up. It's like, oh, I guess I'm not meant to do this.
yeah,
But you just kept pushing through. Like you had children when you were a teenager.
yeah,
You still finished all your college. You defied all the statistics. So
yes,
that's so encouraging here for so many people out there that have the desire, but they've never seen anyone else overcome those hurdles. But
yeah,
now they've seen you do it, so it can kind of help them going. This part of what I do the podcast is to maybe someone out there has a similar calling or dream as you, that it can be done. If there were this 18-year-old version of you, it can be done. Keely's done it.
Yeah.
You overcame all of that. It's it's a miraculous thing.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Are you ready for all the really deep philosophical type questions, Keely?
I'm ready. All right. Well, I'm not boasting. Go for it.
Okay.
Here comes the pineapple
First of
on pizza
all,
question.
Do you believe in aliens? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so my question is I feel like everyone on some level during their life will experience some form of trauma. Not everyone's going to need a trauma specialist. How do you identify the people who experience certain traumas who do need? Like, is there a checklist? Or is it just when you know? Could you break that down for us?
Sure. So part of it's going to be based upon the client who thinks they need it or not, right? The best outcomes are those who seek, help themselves. That's true for, addiction. It's true for counseling of any sort. Research shows that if someone's court ordered to help, the outcomes are not as good, right, as someone who's self-motivated. So someone who seeks out a trauma specialist or a trauma counselor on their own will have a better outcome because they're already in the position that they believe they need help. Now, there are people who do come to me and I will nearly think, you don't need me, actually, because sometimes people get into a rut where they concentrate so much on their past traumas that they're like worried about micro traumas. Maybe we could say it that way. I haven't heard that term, but it just came to my mind. Like a micro trauma, like you said, something that happens to everyone, but they may be either worried specifically that they don't have enough faith and this is why things have happened to them, or they're just, sometimes they're paranoid that they have, that they've been too bad, God's punishing them or something, right? So, I mean, in that way, they really need just hope instilled in them. They really just need encouragement that they're okay, they're not alone, and that they're not as bad off as they see themselves as. And then on the other hand, there are people who have gone through just, unspeakable things, and those people are amazingly resilient as well, and a lot of times they may even downplay that their trauma is a big deal at all, and they're just kind of like, well, but I'm actually going through health concerns, right? And they may actually not see that the trauma is connected to their health or whatever they're going through. Like, oh, I have migraines. I can use that as an example. I have migraines, so I can use that as an example. But a lot of times that's really connected to stress and trauma triggers. I'm not saying that that's the only reason that people have migraines, for sure, but it can be a reason. And so sometimes helping them walk through preceding events to their physical symptoms gives those aha moments and helps them realize that they're connected, and that the trauma kind of needs to be explored a little bit more, and that they may be in a little bit more of a denial of that,
Okay.
Is there a lot of shame still, like in the Christian? You're very Republican and conservative, evangelical, Southern Bible Belt culture. Is there a lot of shame still in the religious community where you just didn't pray hard enough, kind of thing, for everyone in general? And then also, your husband's military, for men, is like, no, you just man up and get over it. Is there still that stigma, or is it getting better, at least?
I am seeing a lot of churches. I do kind of monitor a bunch of different denominations, and Yeah, I have seen that. Even like charismatic ministers and things that used to, again, to reference David Diger Hernandez, he just mentioned that recently. He said, I used to teach that, it was just that you had a lack of faith. But he's like, I'm really recognizing that there are real mental health issues that need to be worked through, and that's the way healing comes. Now, in the New Testament, there are several different words for healing. Like when Jesus would go and heal someone, there's one word that in the Greek transliteration begins with an I, and I can't remember exactly how to say it, um, but the other word is where we get the word therapy from. It's therapeuto.
Oh wow.
And so,
Is
yeah,
that more progressive, like not an instantaneous healing, but a progressive healing?
well, I will admit I need to do more of a deep study on that.
Hmm.
But there's something to that that maybe we don't understand
Oh, wow.
yet, is that obviously there was some therapeutic healing going
Hmm.
on, that, and hey, the word of God says that he sent his word and healed us, right? Healed them. So he can speak a word, just like the Roman centurion came to Jesus and said, all you need to do is say the word and my servant will be healed. And so it can just be a word of comfort. It can be a sermon someone hears. It can be a worship song someone hears. It can be a scripture that someone reads. And literally, God can do therapy on their heart right then and there, right? So it may still be instantaneous, but it also may be progressive. And I'm starting to think that it's more of a progression as well, because what is God's ultimate goal for believers? It's to, as the Apostle Paul says, to come to maturity in faith, right? And so before this interview, I was even thinking about bipolar, for instance. And
Hmm.
again, I need to preface this that I am not a licensed counselor and everything, but this is just a thought. Anyone who listens to this must seek out a licensed therapist if they want to discuss this matter further. But but bipolar, for instance, without sounding offensive, it really can be, in my opinion, a matter of spiritual immaturity. And I don't mean as an insult, like you're immature or you don't have enough faith, but literally, would you say that your infant child who cannot walk yet is immature in walking? Or would you say, I mean, like you could describe it that way. You could say they're immature in their their skills, right? They just can't walk yet because
And
of their
that's different from
pain.
being crippled
Yeah,
or paralyzed. It's a different thing. It's a
exactly.
permanent condition.
Exactly. But truly, sometimes we just really don't understand. Sometimes we may have head knowledge, but we don't have heart knowledge of something in the word or a life experience. Someone who doesn't have kids may not understand at all a parenting issue. That's just a fact because they don't live it. And it's not an insult. That's just, they wouldn't know. And so what I'm saying is that some of these mental health issues that stem from trauma and things may literally just be a spiritual immaturity, and not in an offensive manner, just in an experiential manner, that they haven't experienced the deliverance yet, or they haven't experienced that therapeuto yet that Jesus is trying to provide to them. So,
Going back to that, there's 8 Greek verb tenses, and one was something started in the past, ended in the past. And
mhm.
there's another verb tense for something started in the past that is ongoing.
Mm,
It's an ongoing process. Like you planted a tree, open the thing, put it in the ground, you planted it. But you're growing a tree, you planted it in the past, and it's still growing. But we don't have those in English. So
yeah.
it could be right there in scripture, but so we don't have these concepts. We just read right over it.
Mhm.
And there was a man with a blindness who it was a 2-step healing. It's like, oh, I see trees walking.
Yeah.
And I saw a commentary by a medical doctor about sometimes it's the eyeball itself is healed.
Mm-hmm.
but the brain does not know how to interpret the images. So Jesus had to heal his eyeball, and then he had to heal his brain, because
Yes.
there's two separate things. Because the eye sees everything upside down, and the brain has to flip it. And
Yes.
and so he thought he probably saw these people upside down. They're kind of
Mm.
like trees going, because their legs are spread out the top like a tree branch would be. So he's seeing everyone upside down because his eyeball's fine, but his brain has to be healed to know what to do with the information. So it's like, you could be spiritually healed, but you have these same thought patterns or these same bodily responses. If you're emotionally spiritually healed, you have a bodily response to something.
Yes, absolutely.
I have
Absolutely.
a couple questions for you. So my first question is, what is, in your opinion, what is the most common trauma that you find yourself working with? And what is the hardest trauma to completely help someone heal from?
Great questions there. So what I've actually dealt with most is right now is I have the most clients with um, relationship issues going on right now, that they have not they've been in a long-term marriage, for instance, or something like that, and have not been validated by their spouse, and it's deteriorated the relationship to the point where neither party seems to want to be together anymore. And
Is it related to that ugly new in phrase, the narcissism?
oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that that I think is causing issues. I do believe that the N word is thrown around way too much right now, because okay, everyone has a level of narcissism. We learn that in school, right, Brian? Right?
Right.
Yeah,
Everybody's
everyone has a level of
self-focused. And
Mhm.
then all the responses, how you troll narcissists, just don't talk to them. Just stonewall them. It's like, so completely cut off communication is presented as the perfect solution to
Right.
the relationship issue.
Yep. And everyone, when they're nearly everyone, unless you're just a really, really, really kind person at heart, and there are some of those out there. I have a kid like that who probably would never do this, but almost everyone gaslights each other at some point, and lashes out in anger and says things they regret, and and that's just an emotional response on one hand. And that doesn't mean I'm definitely not making excuses for true, truly when people have gone through a narcissistic relationship. That's on a different level. That is when you have someone like a true narcissist doesn't have the true capacity to have compassion and grace and love for you at all. Um, they they truly only think about themselves, only talk about themselves, and only concentrate on what they want. Will they will control all the finances, for instance. Uh, they will want to make all decisions, and they will put the other party down for wanting to have any input. They do truly want total control, but so many people are um, focused on that they feel controlled some of the time, and then they hyper focus on that a lot, and then it spirals. Once you have that's another thing, that's a foothold that the devil gets on relationships, I feel like, and causes people to start despising one another and things. But again, truly, I am dealing with some pretty rough situations. My clients are going through some really rough things and have gone through really rough things. Um, but when, let's say this, the rocky relationships tend to come when you have one or both parties who have had childhood trauma and it wasn't resolved and it wasn't worked through. And then both parties trigger each other a lot. And so there is, you don't have to be perfect to be married. You don't have to have, the perfect pre-marriage counseling, but just being aware of some of the, the things that do trigger you, and not using them as an excuse either, and saying, well, hey, I can't function if you treat me this way. But just both parties, if they can have an appreciation for one another's struggles, as the Bible says, we're to carry one another's burdens, right? We're not supposed to be like, wow, you're weird and you're psychotic and I don't want to deal with you because you have some struggles. It's more along the line of believers should be willing to walk beside one another and say, hey, you're my other half, you're my helpmeet, and I'm here for you. And yeah, you may annoy me when you're acting like this, but I realize that I need to be there for you and be strong for you when you're going through these things. And the other party should be able to do the same as well. It should be as reciprocal as possible, in a perfect world, obviously. And your second question again was, sorry, I got too far into that.
No, that's okay. It was a really great answer. My second question is, what do you think is the hardest trauma to heal from?
Whew. It's rough because people take different level or different traumas to heart differently. I believe certain personality types are more prone to, for instance, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Like if you're more anxious, even as a kid, you're going to see things, you're in a more traumatic light. You're going to, if you have what's called an external locus of control, that means that you believe like life kind of happens to you and that you don't have much say in what happens. And so it's very difficult to help people that have more of an external locus of control because they feel helpless, and they they just feel like, well, I want help, but I don't think I can actually get help, so it's more along the lines of kind of just hearing them and trying to make them feel validated and heard and cared for, because everybody needs that, and so few people get that in life. And I think the more we progress in society and the closer we get to Jesus's return, the love of many is growing cold, right? And that happens in relationships in families, that happens in, marriages, friendships. I think ever since COVID and race relations and all this has happened in our country, the love of many has really grown cold, in the fact that even good friends have become enemies.
Let me
And
ask you this, and let's be totally vulnerable and honest with each other. Do you think
sure.
it's fair to say that everyone listening to this episode who doesn't go to your podcast is going to experience personal trauma in their life?
Rephrase that a little bit, like everyone who does not come to my
Well, it was just a little joke. I'm giving you
Oh,
the opportunity to
sorry.
plug your podcasts.
Gotcha. No worries. I don't require membership, and I won't excommunicate you if you leave my podcast.
Well, what can we find over there? What's on your podcast? What are they about?
Sure. Mainly, it's like the Lord will just wake me up and, give me a subject that He obviously wants people to hear and talk about. I tend to be a very practical person, so I sometimes I speak broadly about a subject, right? But I really want practical application personally when someone, gives me coaching or advice or counseling. So, you know, I want to give the same to others, basically. So, yeah, you'll find really practical steps about how to become more motivated, parenting stuff, relationship stuff, and even just walking closer with the Lord.
That is so awesome. You have such a wonderful heart too.
Thank you. The podcast is called Intentions of the Heart, actually. So
Intentions of the heart.
Is that
Okay.
on Spotify?
yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And I can put the link on here too. Let me
Yeah.
find it quick.
Check it out.
I was going to ask you about trauma bond. That's a big catchphrase now.
Mm-hmm.
That people use it all kinds of ways. Could you go into that a little bit? Because I have a singles group, and it's a common phrase people use, but everyone has a different definition of it.
Well, yeah. And again, I haven't gotten into, kind of like fawning. I haven't gone into a lot of study about it, but I think it's pretty parallel to what we used to say in the Christian world is, soul ties, right? Would you agree, Brian, from what you've seen?
I think so. It's very you kind of went to this thing together, and now you're stuck for life.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't choose each other outside this traumatic experience.
Right.
And I've heard people in the military are so closely bonded. I mean, I was in the Air Force, but I didn't get deployed or anything. That this guy's got mandatory fun day. He was the only officer, and he's always kind of joke. He always makes a lot of humor, but he's also encouraging people to get mental health support. And it's like people in the military are close because of trauma bonding while deployed. And it's a similar thing. You develop this fear-based situation, and you get close to someone through this.
Yeah. I mean, again, we're always going to kind of have a tie to someone who can understand our situation and maybe get wrapped up in an unhealthy relationship that reminds us of, or is, again, in the Christian world, you could call it, in the charismatic world, you could call it a familiar spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we do tend to gravitate towards what is familiar to us again, and that can go back to the idea of the strongholds. Strongholds are a familiar, safe place. People who remind us of our trauma are somewhat familiar and safe, even though the relationship's not healthy. Again, it just takes I think that, a person's eyes need to be opened to that. And then when they're walking with a trauma specialist about that, if they're willing and they're, ready to hear it, their eyes can be opened to the idea that they have an unhealthy bond to someone. But again, a lot of these buzzwords, I'm just not a buzzword type of person, because everyone's an individual and every situation is unique. And so while we have categories of, mental health disorders, for instance, or situations, or even personality types, sometimes I think those are harmful because it takes away from the uniqueness of every situation and every person, because everyone is uniquely and wonderfully and fearfully made by the Lord. And so I just think that everyone in our field working with each individual needs to keep that in mind, and we need to pray for specific words for each person, and we can't follow a formula for everybody. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's formulaic. Do you think it kind of ties to rejection of, well, no one else is going to accept me because of my past, but you understand my past, so we're just going to commit to this no matter how hard it is,
Mm-hmm.
because no one else is going to get me, understand me. You're the only option, or you're the only one that would get it, or not think I'm crazy kind of situation.
Are you referring to people who
like a trauma bonded relationships, like two people who grew up really poor, for example?
Sure.
That might, that might be the only thing that holds them together is a shared trauma, or two people who grew up
Yeah.
abused
Yeah.
or an addiction. The only thing they have in common is the past, not the future, and not even the present. The only commonality is the past, and they're afraid to, they don't go outside of that because of fear of being
Absolutely.
misunderstood or judged or whatnot.
Yeah, and that can be, I mean, again, people who have a similar trauma can be they can either be iron sharpening iron if one or both of them have heard from the Lord or learned tools to be healed, or it can become detrimental, like you're mentioning, and it can be the blind leading the blind, right? So if you're getting together, and support groups can be the same way, for instance, if you're getting together and everyone is expressing traumas and speaking of their traumas, and it causes all these emotions to be rattled up, but there's no practical solutions suggested, or no one in the relationship or the group is taking the initiative to lead others out of that or to get healthy themselves, then yeah, you're just gonna have two people helping each other downward spiral instead of become stronger and become healed or delivered, right?
So they're just sitting in a mud puddle together, and
Yeah.
they don't want to get out because no one's going to give them a hug if they're covered in mud. And I've seen that. I always wonder, is like, at what point has counseling become detrimental, or a support group become detrimental, or
Yes.
you just started going backwards because, like, crabs in the bucket, one tries to climb out and the other ones pull it back in. And I mean, I
Yes.
grew up in a place very much like that. The whole town is, almost the entire town is just some kind of giant trauma bond, but it's geographical. And if
Yeah.
you leave, there's a lot of backlash for it, but no one really wants to move forward. They just kind of, I accept you as this and you accept me as this, and we're all just going to kind of sit here and stay in this mindset.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yes. You've got to have a stronger person to, you've got to have at least one stronger individual to help shoulder the load out. You've got to have somebody who is willing to try things that aren't comfortable, to get out and to do hard work to get out of it.
Absolutely. And that, and I guess the other question too, with like on the relationship end, at what point is your trauma, not that you're responsible for causing it, but you're responsible for how you react to it, and you, at what point can you not say you just can't blame everything on a trauma history? Because like people can abuse that to the point of, well, I was traumatized, so don't ask me to do anything a normal adult would do, or don't ask me to do better. Just, this is my get out of personal responsibility card at some point. As harsh as that sounds.
No, it's true. It's very true. And, I hope none of my clients listen to the podcast and think I think this of them, because I truly care very deeply about each person. I pray for each person. I cry for each person.
Absolutely.
And because they've been through really, really hard things. But I really feel like the Lord has given me the one key to trauma healing recently. And it's very simple and very complicated all at the same time. And it's just one word: acceptance. And I know I mean, I've talked to a couple of my clients about this, and it's really hard to say that to someone who has been through, without going into specifics about things, but very, very rough things,
I was gonna say, how many times has the air been let out of your tires? Like
Yeah.
that is something you don't want to hear, really.
Well, it's kind of like forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for you. It's for your peace and your healing. It's not for them. because they didn't deserve it and everything. And, I don't believe that the Bible condones forgiving people just for their sake alone, because our God is a God of justice and things. It's not that he wants you to just get over it. But it's that acceptance is just the position you have to get to. If you know the stages of grief, acceptance is the last stage. And so it's the same with trauma. Really, you can vacillate between different stages of like anger and denial and all of these things. But truly, at the end of the day, when you really feel peace is when you accept that it happened, because most of our trauma reactions are protective, right? They are protective in nature. We're doing everything we can to try to make sure something like that never happens again. And so we'll reject people if they remind us of the trauma. We'll reject places. We'll reject smells. We'll reject music. We'll reject all kinds of stuff if it triggers a memory that causes us to think that we need to protect ourselves from whatever, whatever that trauma was. And so when you can accept that it happened, you're actually no longer fighting it. You just say it is what it is and it happened. That doesn't mean it's cool. It doesn't mean that God wanted it to happen to me. Others have free will and they exercised their free will, and I happened to be part of that, unfortunately. But in no way do I mean to sound heartless when I say that, but truly acceptance is what causes us to be healed, because we can say there's nothing else we can do about it in the present. We can't fight it anymore, and we can't fight our triggers. Let them be, and it sounds counterintuitive, just like forgiveness, but it really do feel like that's the answer.
I've only got one more question for you. You've given us almost an hour of your time, and you've been fantastic. So thank you very much for stopping by and hanging out with us. And I do hope that you come back.
Sure.
But I don't know how many more questions your dream guy has. I have this last one, and if you're from the secular world, you would probably refer to it as generational traumas.
Mm-hmm.
The believing community would refer to it probably as like generational curses.
Right.
How do we address that? How do we defeat it? How do we be the generation to break the curse, to break the generational trauma? How do we end it here?
That's, excellent. So a lot of people will focus on like what we would say in the in the Messianic world. We would say the Torah says, first 5 books of the Bible would say that Moses said that the that if a father hates the Lord, right, then his children are cursed to the 3rd or 4th generation, right, and that those who love him, they're blessed for the 1,000 generations, right. So a lot of people will focus on that part of Scripture, and in fact, then in Ezekiel, though, later on, the word says that the soul who sins will die. No longer will it be the father for the sons or the sons for the father. So I tend to take that position, the Ezekiel position on that, because we're all responsible for our own, walk with the Lord, whether we accept Jesus and start walking with him, or whether we're a believer and we sin. But the point there is that the study of epigenetics has started to come out with the idea, though, that still like if your parents are alcoholics, then you do have more of a you're more prone to having those, you have those genes, but yet circumstances are really what turn those genes on and off. So you may be prone to a certain sin nature, for instance, or a certain mental health condition, but really and truly it can be your environment which turns those genes on and off, which is very interesting. So again, so I don't think anyone is just, uh, I don't think anyone's bound to the curses of their parents. I think that can become another fear that we're worried about and can keep us, just hung up. What do you think, Brian?
I think absolutely, and that's been I guess second after several years is, oh well, this is apparently what I'm stuck with.
Yeah.
It's like it's unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to get help, sometimes in certain communities, you get patted on the head of, what did your great great grandfather do? And some people don't even know their great grandfather, but there's this theory, your life is terrible because great great grandfather was a Freemason or pirate or
Right.
whatever. Like, I don't even know the guy. So it seems very unfair, can tint your view of God. I'm doomed to this because someone I didn't 100 years before I was born did something, and this is what's caused it. And I've suffered my whole life because I didn't know such and such did something because you're an orphan or something.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult, but also it's just very the dooming of, well, this is what you're stuck with.
Right. So the book of Hebrews says that, the blood of bulls and goats could not cleanse the conscience of the worshiper or the sinner, right? And so that implies that it was only the blood of Jesus that could do so. But many of us are not allowing that. When we become born again, we don't really see ourselves as a new creation many times. You know what I'm saying? We don't see that.
Half a creation.
Right, exactly. That we're still bound by other things, or we have to make sure that we renounce everything. And if we don't know, like you mentioned, that there may be some sin in the family line that we don't know about and that we're open to. But again, I believe that God is so good. Jesus's blood was so precious and it's so valuable that why would he offer us new life and a new start? And our sins are forgiven as far as the east is from the west, cast into the sea of forgetfulness. That's what saved me, was those verses right
Except
there.
for those sneaky ones, great great grandpa didn't know about.
Right, exactly. But I'm living proof, without calling out who. Someone in my husband's family is high up in the Freemasons. I mean, he's a very active member. But you know what? We don't experience that. And because and the only thing that I may have residual after I was a Wiccan and became born again was just old thought patterns that I needed to get rid of. And again, those strongholds that you may run to because you're just used to it, it's something familiar. But once you learn that you don't have to run to those things and that those are not in line with scripture, then you can live in that newness of life. You can be free. Who the Son sets free is free indeed, truly.
Absolutely. And my last question was, I guess, procedural. So if someone wanted to contact you, how they do it, and what's the procedure, and for looking into getting coaching, do you do like a consultation or interview process, or how's all that work?
Yeah, so I have an intake process where I, send you a questionnaire and things to just kind of see what you're going through. And then I'll send you, information about myself, my informed consent, and what basically the parameters of coaching. Coaching is technically not mental health counseling, but again, from a spiritual perspective, you can kind of dive into those things as long as you're keeping it to the faith aspect. And so if anyone wants to get a hold of me, they can either email me at Daniels dan.keely@gmail, which is DANIELS.KEELY@gmail.com. And you can go ahead and request, like you said, the intake paperwork, and we can talk a little bit and then see if you'd like to schedule with me for coaching. And I do half-hour appointments and hour appointments. So whatever, is in your budget, I can do that.
So we're also going to have you on. We have a listing on Psalm 16 Ministry under coaches, and also under trauma. So we have you on there as well. And let's talk shalom.com for our podcast. We have a guest list. Let's talk shalom.com/guest. We put all of our guests on there with your picture and a link to how to contact you as well. So multiple ways of reaching out to you. Yeah. So they can just email you direct too for the form.
They can, or go to the website, your website as well. Yep.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Thank you so much. I feel encouraged. I actually answered some questions I've been having for a while, and not just on the trauma side, but also on the theology side, and even where to go with my college stuff. So that was very, very helpful to me personally. Help you guys too.
Yeah. Now, please be sure to come back and hang out with us, or we're going to sell your email address to telemarketers.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much. And you've been a great guest. Thank you. You all have a wonderful day. Evening.
Thanks, Keely.
You too. Bye.
True.